Good morning and welcome to WNHH Radio's Dateline New Haven. I'm your host, Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make New Haven tick. Mayor Toni Hart makes New Haven tick morning and night. She's here in the WNHH studio for her weekly Mayor Monday checkup. But she's not confused. If you're confused, it is Thursday if you're listening live. If it's actually Monday, you are not listening live. I'm going to explain in a second. Mayor Monday is a show we do every week where Mayor Hart fills us in on what she and we are up to in the Elm City. Because of some crazy scheduling problems, including a whole bunch of Jewish holidays, secular holidays, etc., we have an 8-week stretch where no Mondays work to do the show live. So the mayor has graciously made time in her schedule to do a bi-weekly Thursday version of Mayor Monday until we get through Columbus Day. And then we'll be back. But you don't have to remember that. Just listen on. And we want to also thank Gateway Community College and Bertram Moses PC for providing financial support for today's program. Mayor Hart, thanks so much for coming in. How you doing?
Good. How are you, Paul?
I'm well. It's a new school year. School started the end of last week.
Yes, it's exciting.
Usually time of optimism. The kids come off the bus the first day and a whole bunch of schools. The grown-ups come to slap them five. You and the superintendent show up everywhere. So how are you feeling to be in school? What are things looking like?
Well, I think it's going to be a great year. I feel really, really positive about it. And I think everybody else should as well. I think everybody's excited to be back at it.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when my kids were going to school, and I was always really happy when the start of school.
Yeah, that time where you could actually work from 8:30 to 3:30, right, before you come and get them. I remember that, coming to get them at the end of the day, and you got to get everything done.
Yeah. So
it was always nice to see.
So I think a lot of parents are like, oh, okay, kids are back at work too.
And the schools are getting used to there are a bunch of cuts and switching around people. So there's going to be a few weeks of getting used to who's where and who's not where. You have a bunch of guidance counselors got moved around and some eliminated, resource officers, things like that. Teachers pretty much set. I mean, we shield the teachers from the layoffs.
I think so. And I think that hopefully we had some teachers that we actually had to hire in certain areas like math where, there just aren't as many people that go into that type of teaching.
Why is that?
I think for whatever reason in America, I think this is an American problem that math is made to be so difficult for people that they just choose to do other things.
All right, with our one exception being ESUMS, which are math science school, which people kind of dying to get into that one.
I know. I think that people want to get into it, and parents certainly want their children to learn it. It's just that a lot of times other things are far more interesting than, I think, the way that we teach math in our country. I think
could use some updating.
I think it probably could.
And is the challenge making it applicable to everyday life?
I think so. I think if you could do that and you can show the connection and correlation between other things that we do in our lives all of the time, that more people would be interested in.
I just remember when I got to, I think it was 10th grade, all of a sudden it stopped making sense to me. Through 10th, it made tons of sense. Pre-algebra made so much sense to me. It was all logical, the calculations. And then all of a sudden with sine and cosine and stuff, I couldn't get past that.
And I think that they've really got a way they've got to figure out a way to make all of that relate to our lives. My mother even said to me, oh, algebra, who cares? You'll never use it again.
Algebra I kind of use, yeah.
I know you do. But a lot of times people feel you don't. Yeah.
And then sometimes we want people to go into careers like computer coding and software engineer.
Yes.
And now in New Haven, we had a big announcement this week.
Right.
You and the governor were on James Street, even though this wasn't a public money announcement, which must have been really nice for you guys.
Mm-hmm.
So $13 million is coming in from Silicon Valley to district. You're not supposed to say I think it's like
district,
the official district. And do you have to say it in all capitals?
I don't know how you do that, but yeah, I think they would like that.
A marketing guy runs that place. So that's our new tech campus. They're trying to make it like a Silicon Valley campus on James Street in old Connecticut bus depot. That's happening big time. You got some digital surgeons, all these kind of companies in there, and incubators, and they're going to have the canoe launch and all that kind of groovy stuff. And now they announced, you were there, $13 million coming from Silicon Valley investors to start a satellite of a successful Silicon Valley school for adults who want to become software engineers. It's hard to get in. Most people don't get in. They apparently have a good record of at least admitting people of color and women into a profession that notoriously has lacked representation in those sectors. And you spend 2 years, a pretty intensive course learning to become a software engineer. And it's expensive, but that if they want to get people who have a lot of money so you can agree to pay it back based on the job they're sure you're going to get, which in Silicon Valley starts at 105,000 on average, and they think here it'll be 90,000. Did I explain it right, or what am I missing?
No, I think you're absolutely right. It's and it's I guess the other thing about it is that they teach in a different model, so they it's sort of a group model and
hands-on, right?
Hands-on, project-based.
And that's what you're just talking about. That's what made me think of segueing to this earlier than I was expecting to.
Yeah.
Because you're talking about teaching math, which is not just math, but math's involved. And it is hands-on. I was reading up on this place. They say that they look for people who might not like lecture-type learning. They want to be doing stuff.
They want to be doing stuff. But one of the interesting things that they talked about is that they spend a lot of time with individuals on presentation. So that by the time you finish, not only are you able to do the coding and the other kinds of really technical stuff, work in groups, because often that field is really a lot of group work and team working. But then you're also able to describe what it is that you're doing to lay people, and they think that's why they're the people who graduate from there get so many jobs, even over people that have gone to some of the most prestigious colleges.
Because presentation matters.
Yeah, presentation matters.
And it's a problem. I mean, these are pretty heavy-duty Silicon Valley people. I mean, you're including Pierre Omidyar, who founded eBay, and you're putting Jerry Yang, who was the chief executive of Yahoo. And my understanding is part of the reason they did it was that there's a shortage. The industry's fast-growing. It might be one of our fast-growing sectors in the country. Good jobs, but they can't always fill them. So now that we're trying to do that, New Haven does dovetail with the development we've been promoting, whether it's 300 George Street, whether it's Science Park, whether it's District, I don't know, with the or without the. It seems like that's where we're trying. I mean, that's one of the challenges facing us that you've talked a lot about, which is getting good jobs for people here, getting them able to get those good jobs.
Absolutely. And I think across the state, the governor gave a figure of about 9,000 positions going filled because people don't have the skills.
And what kind of positions are those?
I think they're IT-related positions.
So we got to match the people. We got people in New Haven who need jobs. We got to match, but then you got jobs going to fill. We got to make that connect.
You've got to make the connect, and traditional education hasn't really caught up to what the needs of the business sector are, unfortunately.
I'm always interested in how these Silicon Valleys address problems, because sometimes I'm a little skeptical, but they just kind of think they have a new way of solving it that'll include rate of return. So even though they're trying to fill a social need here, it's for profit, but it seems like it's done quite well. And I'm interested in this idea that, if you don't have the $85,000 to go in, you will pay it back over 5 years if you get the job. So they're taking the risk as investors, if I understand it right. If they don't succeed in getting you that job, you don't have to pay it back, right?
Right. That's what we were told.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting.
And I think it's one of the ways in which you can think about, even just in regular higher education. Is that not a model that we ought to think about using, particularly for certain degrees?
Boy, that would be a problem for the Trump University, because those people don't get degrees and learn anything. So they just take your money and put liens on your house.
No, that wouldn't have worked for them.
So maybe they're not going to, maybe their future isn't going to be here. Maybe some of their look.
Well, I would hope not.
Back when the older Fasten education was Davis Street School. It's 100 years old this year. Markeisha Ricks was there the first day, and they're getting ready for a whole year of that. Did your kids go there?
No. My
niece went there. It was a pretty good school. It's always been a pretty good school.
It's a good school, great principal, and they've had great principals.
They had Lola Nathan for all those years. She was awesome.
They did. She was awesome, and
very diverse student body.
Very much, and people fight in the neighborhood because it's not a neighborhood school.
Oh, it's not.
No, it's a magnet.
Is there a neighborhood preference?
There might be a slight one. But
that's a shame that's been one of the shames of the magnet program. And you live in that neighborhood in Beverly Hills, they call part of that neighborhood right nearby. And shame you can't just walk down the street to that school.
Well, I've had people come to me and their kids haven't gotten in and try to help them get in, but it's been really difficult. So I would say that they may have they have a whole categories of preferences, and you have to sort of hit all of them. It reminds me of that game where you have the ball hitting, and if you're really lucky, you get the prize. But if you don't hit all those balls, you might be out of luck.
And then there was right before school opened, I found a very interesting controversy, not because of the reasons people were upset about it, but it got settled. New Haven Academy was a charter school founded here on this model called Facing History, Facing Ourselves. It's known nationally, great job. This married couple started it, Meredith Gavin and Greg Baldwin, and he's the principal, and she doesn't report to him because that'd be nepotism. She reports to someone in central office. So as a new superintendent came in, looked at the nepotism policies and said, we got to look at this, and this is kind of weird. And when new people were switched, she was told, you're not going to be able to stay because you can't work in the same building reporting. Your boss can't be your husband. And there was a real outcry about it. And the decision was reversed. So she's going to stay. And I had something interesting. It was very interesting to me about that. Nothing to do with the personalities involved. But what was your take on that? What did you think about that?
Well, I thought that, sometimes you have to take, we've decided that we're going to have all of these unusual schools that have certain kinds of themes. And in the case of those schools that have been founded by certain people and are doing well, I saw most recently the New Haven Promise, data that looks at high schools and persistence in college. And New Haven Academy's numbers are phenomenal. And so here's the school that is doing really well. And we happen to have two people who are married together who founded the school and are helping to operationalize the school. And we have a nepotism policy, and we found a workaround. And I think that we have to look at the data. Everybody says, oh, we're going to be data-driven. Well, if we're going to be data-driven, and there are ways to work around the nepotism policy, but have a husband basically supervising a wife, then why wouldn't you look at the data that says this has been successful? So I agreed with those who were perplexed that this policy would stand in the way of the success of that school.
I think in the end, everyone on a practical measure agreed with you.
Right.
Pretty much everyone, maybe not 100%.
Not that everybody.
Not 100%. But in the end, everyone said, look, it's working, right? You want things to be working. And there's no question they do a great job. I've been in that school a lot. They teach citizenship in such interesting ways and teach people to think for themselves. And a lot of their talented kids come through here. But I was also very sympathetic to the argument of Carol Burks. Because when you have a new superintendent come in and you're telling her, we want you to improve the system and be gutsy. And she looked, and that nepotism question is real. So in an abstract way, I'm not questioning the final decision to keep it the way it was. I would have made the same decision to keep it the way it was. But I found the debate interesting because it is true that what some of the comments made were like, no person should be more important than the school. And that maybe it's not a great idea if some people don't like the way things are going. Maybe they can't speak up. Like, I think people are very happy that community. I heard a lot from those people. But theoretically, if someone's not happy, do they feel comfortable speaking up if they feel like it's a husband and wife? Those were just good questions. They said if it's a public school, is that different than if it were a private school?
Well, I think that what I've observed in my 4 years on the Board of Education, that, look, we have people that work for New Haven Public Schools who engage in public comment against policies that all three of the superintendents that we've had have proposed. So I don't think there's any level of discomfort in expressing your opinion in New Haven. And I think that's one of the really good things about New Haven.
Well, I would say this all had a good ending. We had the right result of a school that works. And I think we also had a healthy airing of looking at policies and issues.
No, and I think
I hope that doesn't stop.
And I think that we've got to have ways to have these conversations. And I certainly hope that people, my observation is people don't in New Haven feel threatened if they have a different point of view.
I thought this was a good one. This ended well. And it was a good process. Bob, you're on. Bob, you found us on Thursday.
It's Bob in the background.
Hey, Bob. Yeah, you have a little cough there.
No. Just clearing my voice.
Yeah, you got to get ready for the big question.
But anyhow, my question to you, Mayor, and I guess I'll lead off with a yes or a no, and hopefully I'll get some kind of answer out of you, was do you think last month was the worst time in office for you?
Thanks for that question. That's a good question.
An interesting question.
The K2 overdoses, resignation, the firing of a lady who had been in City Hall for a long time, and than the $4,000 for the uniforms,
Well,
which you took a lot of flack over.
I think that it was a tough month. A lot of things happened all at once that, if you sort of look at my tenure, have happened over more extended periods of time. But so I would say that it was a tough month. I honestly think, though, that it helps us identify some problems that need to be examined and fixed, and that oftentimes people around certain things really just have a piece of the information, and if they had more information, then I think that they would understand why things happened in the way that they did. But yes, a lot of things happen all at once, and we're dealing with them.
Right, Bob. Great question, Bob. You were around.
I have one more question.
You were around in the Bob. You were around
concerning the. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
You were around when John DeStefano was mayor.
Oh yes.
Do you remember when his fifth year? Mayor Harp is in her fifth year, the beginning of her third term. I don't know why we're getting that buzz. I'm sorry about that. Just 1 second. Let me just turn that down. Sorry about that for 1 second. In Mayor DeStefano's fifth year, a lot of things happened at once. It was a really testing, trying period. And I have a theory that third terms are when a lot of things come together unexpectedly at once and test the person and see how you're going to get to your next phase. You get in new, you change a lot of things, you rack up some successes, and then it comes and hits you. I found that with governors too. I think third term is the test.
Well, it's been a test this year.
Mayor, I just have one more question. Did you get a chance to watch Aretha Franklin's funeral?
I've watched snippets of it, but I just haven't had that kind of time. I haven't had a 9-hour swath
What
of
did
time.
you think of it? Do you have an opinion?
I didn't get to hear the eulogy, which evidently is very controversial, so I can't comment on that. But some of the music that I've heard has been extraordinary. And as I reflect upon her life, because I remember being a teenager and some of her songs and how they inspired really, maybe 2 generations of people. And what I have done is I've gone back to listen to her music.
Me too. Yeah. We're doing that. Yeah. We spent a night doing that.
Yeah. So those
are great songs.
Absolutely. So and it's just amazing because everybody sings, right? And like I find myself trying to sing some of those songs, and there's some of those notes I can't find.
Yeah. That's what I loved about her until the end of her career when she she soared. Yeah.
Yeah.
They had some great old footage from the 60s when she was doing those first Atlantic sessions, and how they put the songs together sometimes with her sister, who was one of the writers and background singers, and how they just got the instrumentation right. It was such a great moment in musical history.
Absolutely. Just amazing.
And it really resonates today. Well, thank you, Bob.
All right. Talk to you later.
So one person who's been giving you a hard time this last month is Len Fasano, state senator in North Haven, was a senator with you. And he did something unusual for someone who doesn't cover a city, represent a city. He's a Hartford legislator from North Haven. And he issued 2 press releases very personally critical of you. First, when they're in the K2 overdoses on the green. We've talked about that. And then about this matter of buying uniforms for your city hall staff. Yeah. $4,000. So I had him on the radio yesterday. And I say, Len, what do you got against Mayor Harp? I mean, do you write press releases about Avon if they spend $4,000 you didn't think was right, or if they had a public health crisis? And it was kind of interesting. And one thing he said was, I represent the whole state. I work in New Haven. I grew up here. I think that Mayor Harp has done it. He actually praised you. He says he's done a very good job on the green once we pointed this out. Now she's taking it seriously. And
BS, excuse me.
And I'll get to the second part. He's still giving you a hard time about the uniforms. And I said, do you do $4,000 in Avon? He said, well, we send so much money to New Haven, and we deserve to know how our money's spent. And I said, well, from New Haven, we see it that you take money from New Haven and you give only half that you said you'd give us back. With payments in lieu of taxes. And he said, well, I would support full payments in lieu of taxes. So we just talked about how differently that looks from different communities. So what do you think? I mean, were you surprised that your former colleague was going after you then? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think that it's a little outrageous as a leader who gets to make the final decision on the budget, where they've reduced us in the second quarter by 9.4 million, haven't taken really responsibility for the other reductions that could occur across other departments, to turn around and blame me when we have a $10 million shortfall, by the way, which we could really say is their fault. But, I'm not going to say that. But what I am going to say is that, he doesn't really, he reads the spin. He failed to call me and ask me about the uniforms. The $4,000 for the uniforms was from a surplus in the fire department. Fire department people were angry about the administration in fire taking over the uniform account. It was an account that was managed by the union for many, many, many years. And then the chief and others saw that they were buying sneakers and other things that didn't have anything to do with uniforms, and took it back into administration. They were having a fight, the union and the administration, over who's going to be the number 2 chief. And the administrative chief was the one that became, who is number 2 by everyone's acknowledgement except theirs. And he was the one who then ordered the uniforms and discovered that they had an $8,000 surplus. And we had contacted them 4 years ago to see if they would help us with the uniforms. And they said, we have this surplus. They get well over $100,000, which had been going to the unions. They misspent the money. They had a surplus. And he said, why don't you just use this surplus for your uniforms? And so we thought, well, okay, that seems reasonable. What we will do is pay back to that account, and then it can just go into surplus. And so what it shows is that the political background was never, ever discussed in the discussion of this $4,000 problem. We have people in the fire department who work there, some of whom were in other unions and no longer are officers there, who have a direct line to various reporters and give their point of view. But they never really ask, well, what's the backstory? So
I guess I had a different question. As a state senator from North Haven,
why does he care?
How did you feel? Did you get along with him well when you were state senators together?
I always liked Lenny Fasano. We always got along.
So what do you think's going on? Have you called him up and said, Len, what's this about?
Look, I think that, like probably before last month, as was pointed out by Bob, my numbers were probably some of the strongest numbers among Democrats in the state. And I think that what he's doing is attacking me to rally his base.
For what?
Because they're worried that some of what's going on nationally, the fact that somehow they got someone that nobody knows to be their governor.
In other words, we have a governor election. Control of the state is at stake.
Right.
It could be a very close election if polls are right.
Yes, it's going to be close.
So the Republicans are trying to make everyone hear about Dan Malloy because he's unpopular. Democrats want everyone to hear about Donald Trump because he's very unpopular and he's in the news more. So you feel you're being used as a punching bag for Republicans to help rally the vote for November?
That's what I think. That's one of the things that I think.
All right, that's politics. You could deal with that.
I know. I mean, it's fine with me. But get the story right, And even the Green story,
Yeah, you said BS when I told you he praised you. He said, now I want to give Mayor Hart credit because after I raised these issues, he finally started dealing with the problem.
So like it was him. That's the BS. We've been working on it for 4 years. And, and we could use some help, by the way. So, don't criticize unless you want to ante up and do something about it. And, that's my challenge to him.
Well, he said, I put the same challenge to him. He said he would be very willing to support your idea of having a drop-in center a block from the Green where people would get Narcan, can dry out. He said as long as they don't get methadone. So I'm sure you don't want a methadone distribution center a block from the Green.
Well, they already get methadone. That's part of the problem.
Yeah. So what about that idea? Is that going forward? What is the status of your latest thinking on the Green stuff?
So I do think that we should have a drop-in center. I know that Cornell Scott Hill Health Center has offered to work with the Sunrise Cafe that was started by Ann Calabrese down at St. Peter's. I believe that's the name of it.
And St. James. They got two names. Two saints. They double sainted. Although I think it's going out of business, right?
And I think, as you pointed out the last time we discussed it. The building itself is up for sale.
That's what I meant. The cafe is not going out of business. I think the church is.
Yeah, and so I know that they're looking for someone to buy it. But in the meantime, it's being used for this, and we're hoping that we can find the resources to help Cornell Scott extend the hours. It only goes until 11 o'clock.
So even though K2 was the issue a couple of weeks ago, a lot of the overdoses have been opiates, and every day people overdosing. Mm-hmm. And we've talked about all the people coming to the city because of the Abt Foundation Clinic. It's the only methadone clinic in the state that lets you get methadone even if you're testing positive for other drugs. Mm-hmm. And they also are keeping people on longer than they sometimes want because they think this research shows that it's good to be on it 3 to 5 years to have long-lasting effects. What's your take on that? Because they're really debating. It involves a lot of detail. You know, everyone's mad at Abt, and Abt defends itself. There's a lot of detail we need to know about what works and what doesn't in treatment. Are they right to give both drugs? As they say, look, that saves lives. Often you're addicted to opiates and other drugs, and opiates specifically can kill you. Fentanyl can kill you. So even if you're on those other drugs, we want to keep people alive so they can deal better with everything. Other people say that's getting us people from all over the state, so why don't the other clinics do it?
Well, you know, evidently, you know, they're not the only evidence-based practice in the state. Other clinics use other evidence that says that is not the case. And, you know, look, we were meeting with the proprietors of the Green yesterday, and my police officers basically said, it's not methadone that saves lives, it's Narcan. So, you know, I mean, so.
But that's today, that's not long term, right?
Well, that was what they said based upon what we have seen. Look, I think that for 75% of the people that they're right. I think for the people that come in with dirty urines and that they really ought to have a different protocol for those people, that they shouldn't have to wait for 2 or 3 years to get case management and to get behavioral health counseling, that they ought to be able to get that immediately because they have a more intensive problem. And I would say that's a small majority of the people that they serve.
What do you mean small? Do you mean more than half do have dirty urines?
I would say that, no, I think that probably maybe 10 to 15% do. So it's a small group, and it may be small majority, but it's a small of the majority is what I should have said, of the people that they serve. And I would say that for the majority of the people that they serve, that their protocol is probably fine. But for those who come in consistently with urines that indicate they've been taking other drugs, that they need a different protocol and that they need to actually engage in other types of behavioral health care and case management for these people.
How about the rest? Do you agree with them? Because the reason it prompted me, the police caught someone for shoplifting. It comes from Waterbury. And she said, you know, I've been wanting to go off the methadone and get counseling. It's hard to get counseling right away. And they told me, are you sure? She'd been on and off methadone for years. Now she's been on since November. So I asked the head of the clinic about it. And she said, actually, that's true. We do want to make sure that they don't have the wrong reasons for wanting to get off methadone. Sometimes it's a hassle because they're traveling from Waterbury or, you know, to come in every day. And that might not be the way that's going to help them. That they say their research shows that the people who stay off the longest term have stayed on it for 3 to 5 years. And she said, yes, we would love to have everyone have a counselor right away. We have group sessions. We have counselors on call, but we just don't have the budget, that other centers don't have any counseling, and that we'd love the money. We just don't have it. What do you think?
I think for those people that come in with dirty urines, they ought to be able to get
What
counseling.
about the majority?
You know, honestly, if they can be maintained on methadone and can go through their practice model and it's not negative and destructive to their lives, many people on methadone work and they do very well. I think that's fine if it works for them. I know it doesn't work for the people that hang out on the green and the people who have dirty urines. And I think they need to have a different practice model for that.
All right. Well, this is interesting stuff. You've been dealing with this issue for many years in public health, in the legislature, and
yeah.
And Cornell Health Scott with the homeless. I mean, this isn't new, although it becomes new with the different drugs and the different trends.
And, you know, I look at Cornell Scott Hill Health Center. They have a methadone maintenance clinic, and they have an entirely different model, and they believe that their model is successful.
And what's their model?
Well, you know, they provide the methadone and they provide case management to everyone. So, and they get the same reimbursement, frankly, that is gotten by Abt. So I don't understand why they can't do that immediately with
Well,
me.
one person suggests, I don't know if it's fair or not, that app makes a lot of money. That app makes a lot of money because of the methadone. And that the
Well-
more they keep it on methadone, the more money they make. Is that a fair charge, or are they getting scapegoated?
I don't know. I haven't really looked at their books, but like I know they get paid every time they dose that. It's probably not a lot per dose, but
Mhm.
they do get paid, and I think that one of the things that they should be looking to do is to, if they're saying that they can show that the amount that they get paid per dose per visit is not adequate for there to be case management, to be some kind of behavioral health intervention, then they should be going to the legislature and asking that they get more and get another payment, an added payment for the behavioral health intervention. And during the years that I was in the legislature, I don't recall them ever coming and asking for that.
All right. But I'm asking you to remember that you're listening to Mayor Monday on WNHH 103.5 FM, live streamed at newhavenindependent.org. If you're listening live, it's Thursday on Mayor Monday. If you're listening to her on Monday for Mayor Monday, it's a recording. I'm not going to explain that whole thing again. Deborah Russell writes in, I used to work there. The clients need more than 3 to 6 months of treatment.
Oh, they absolutely do. If you're going to be on methadone maintenance, we have some people that have been on for 30 years. I think you need to have treatment all along because often these people are duly diagnosed. They have other kinds of issues besides just an addiction or a substance use or substance abuse type situation, and they really need other help. And I listened to that same interview, and the woman who
Oh, you did? Yeah.
I did. She basically was saying, "Look, I'm depressed. I need something else," and that's why she was saying she takes these other drugs. And I think oftentimes we don't recognize that people become addicted because they're trying to self-medicate around behavioral health issues that they have. And if all you're doing is giving them methadone, you're not addressing the behavioral health underlying problem. And that's all I'm saying. And for those people who then use other drugs, they may be dosing for the underlying behavioral health problem. It could be depression, it could be anxiety. All of these things ought to be addressed by somebody. And it would seem that where you go to get your methadone would be the place.
All right. Deborah Russell says hello to you as well, Tony.
Hi, Deborah.
Hello, Deborah.
She was one of my babysitters.
Oh, really?
I thank you for all the good work you did, Deborah.
Oh, back in the day.
Back in the day.
All right.
She's part of my children's success.
Well, one success this summer was One City.
Yes.
Well, that was our campaign to have all 12 community management teams in the city working together on having events all 60 days of 2 months of the hardest summer, ending on August 26th. You had a big celebration on the green and for how it went. And we ended up having 10,000 people participate in 857 events in all the neighborhoods. How do you feel it went?
I thought it was phenomenal. I thought the idea of our community management teams coming together and planning for events throughout the summer was fantastic. Just the coming together of them was fantastic.
That's what I felt was the big thing.
Yeah. But to then actually come up with a plan and then operationalize it and make it available to the people of New Haven and probably other people as well was phenomenal.
It's interesting. It didn't make a lot of news, although we wrote about it like every other day. But I mean, it didn't make a lot of broader news because I think we're living in a time when people are paying attention to what divides us.
Yes.
And this was a counter story to that.
It really
because
was.
it really was people from all walks of life going into each other's neighborhoods, even if they never did before, and figuring out how to make something good happen all summer long. So I hope it continues.
They intend to have it continue. They're going to continue working as an overall committee to sort of put the planning together. They may do something in the fall. They may come up with a program in the fall, maybe something in the spring, and they're going to continue to work.
And they said
summer.
they want next summer work on transportation. They want to get the Yale shuttle to help bring people around because sometimes it's hard for them to get around. And I guess they weren't able to do their club card thing where you go to different local businesses. So they'll do that next year.
No, they said they need a little bit more time with that. But that to me is one of the more exciting things.
Yeah,
that
I thought it was a great thing.
Yeah.
And did you notice ever on your way to work that there's a new vinyl record store on Fountain Street near the cross with Whaley in Westville Village?
Oh, I didn't
Elm
notice
City
that.
Sounds. They had their opening the other week. This is a big thing now, vinyl records. You know,
Yes.
I don't feel it, even though I loved that heyday, like that was Aretha Franklin heyday.
Right.
And people say it sounds better, it's more authentic. You know, I love the sound of good CDs and streamed, and CDs are even old now. like websites and paper newspapers. But you know, now you're just getting them downloaded. But I guess vinyl's back in a big way. It's not just in New Haven.
No, I think people who are really into music and they have the old, what we would call record players.
Yeah, and they're back.
And they're expensive.
And new recordings are coming out in vinyl. Because what I didn't like is that, you know, it would scratch. Yeah, and you have to futz with the arm and everything, and then blow the needle and make it right. And, you know, and it sometimes skip.
I know, and you had to have enough money to get a new needle, because if you didn't, you'd mess up your records. And I was saying, my Aretha Franklin records, my Smokey Robinson and the Miracle records were all white after a while because I scratched them all.
But people claim, who know the business and know sound, they say there's something authentic or even sounds better. Like everything's kind of clean with digital recordings.
And you know, you
don't
have
get the
to
noise.
have special ears, though.
Yeah.
For those who have
I don't
ears
have those
to hear.
ears. I'm lucky at my age I still can hear the music.
I know.
But I didn't ask you about the most pressing issue in town.
What's that?
I know you're trying to duck it, but I want to get you on the record on this one.
Well, I'm going to try to escape.
Okay, ready? Okay. I see you walking up the pea pot.
Oh.
Okay, I was buying my lunch the other day, where I go at least once a week to the Great Bond Meat place. I get the lemongrass tofu on rice noodles, and it's a place on Orange Street run by a Vietnamese immigrant who used to be a geneticist at Yale and gave it up to run this great place. And I was buying it the other day, and he was just steaming mad. He said, "Look at this ticket," and I didn't quite understand at first what he was talking about, but he was mad because he's really fed up with people's having their dogs pee in front of his place. He had a flower pot, they go in a flower pot. So he put a sarcastic sign up saying, this is pay to pee. And if you want to come in, if you don't want to pay, I'll just return the favor for you. And he's been doing like surveillance camera people. So he got a $250 ticket from the public space person, came to pay his visit. Hannah Smith, who, by the way, I think is one of our great public servants. What she's done lately with getting volunteers all over the city to teach us how to recycle better, which is a big national problem, what she's done with public space improvements. So she came and she got a complaint. Someone said, "Oh my God, they're paying people to pee right outside. It's going to smell terrible on Orange Street." So she came in and she gave him the $250 ticket for creating a public nuisance. So I wrote a story about it, and people have been talking not about like whether we're going to have a new Supreme Court justice or whether we're going to end up bombing North Korea or not. We're talking about whether he should get $250 for a pee, but more importantly, where dogs should go to pee, because they do like to leave their mark everywhere.
They do.
So what was your take on the big the tempest in a pea pot in New Haven?
Well, you know,
I didn't get to use the headlines, so I wanted to use it here.
Well, there is a problem. There is a problem in downtown New Haven with people not picking up after their dogs. I mean, it's not just the water; it's also the other, you know. And I think that we've got to be, as pet owners, you know, I have 2 dogs myself, and I walk them, and I think that we've just all got to be more vigilant about what we let our pets do.
But some people said if you can have pets in the city, they're going to pee. Like, I understand number 2, that's a biggie. And I would argue New Haven's made great strides on that. I remember in the 80s, I used to live on a Fairfield Street where like every inch was dog poop. And I had a big fight with my alder, Marty Dunleavy, at the time, because there was a proposal to make it, you fined if your dog poops on the ground, you don't clean it up. And he said, "I think it's not going to work. Government shouldn't overreach." But in fact, it worked. You guys passed that law. And even though I'm sure there are places where the poop is bad, maybe I'm missing something, by and large, and maybe because I'm thinking of the past, it's night and day. But how do you stop them from peeing? I don't get that one.
Well, I think that it's really difficult, and I think the real issue was the sign, right? And you know, sometimes, you know, and I think that Hunt is great. I love her, and
yeah, I do too.
And,
I didn't like that she was getting beat up.
And it's unfortunate, and I sometimes though you kind of negotiate with somebody and say, you know, like that's really.
I think what happened is she didn't understand that it was a joke.
Yeah.
I think when you watch that video. I think.
Yeah.
But what about, like, some people said dogs shouldn't be in cities. Some people say
I think that's absolutely ridiculous.
Dogs are got. I mean, that's one reason I think that they're building that new bunch of apartments off Union Street is everyone loves that dog park.
Right, right.
So the dog park, you could pee there. But I don't know what people are supposed to do. I don't own a dog. But I know what you're supposed to do when your dog wants to mark every place. You're supposed to stop them.
It's part of their behavior, unfortunately. But you know, and it rains here.
Yeah, that's right. It does rain here. Anyway, I hope we can resolve that big crisis in New Haven. And the Domino's Pizza, another thing people are a little worked up about is Domino's Pizza wants to. We're applying for $5,000 from Domino's Pizza to pave some. They have a program where they give cities around the country money to pave potholes, which I realize is kind of a good idea on Domino's Park, is they deliver a lot of pizzas.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a way where they can address a public good that affects their business by
Right.
contributing to have their drivers not drive into potholes.
I
But some
know.
people say we're the pizza city because, the potholes say Dunkin' Donuts on them. I'm sorry, Domino's Pizza on them.
Mhm.
So the pizza purists are in New Haven saying we're the pizza city. We shouldn't be getting money from Domino's to fill our potholes. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think that one of the things that until we get enough money from the state, I think we should look at getting money everywhere. I don't know whether or not we want to brand it with Domino's or how the brand actually works. But we had Jeff Pescasolido come
He's the
to
head of Public Works.
come to our kitchen cabinet, and one of the things that he pointed out is he gets about $3 million to work on the streets a year, and he basically said he can't keep up with all the streets with getting so little money. That's basically what he told
Yeah,
us.
it's a tough process. And we worked out, you're part of this, that worked out this whole system so it'd be fairer.
Right.
Different parts of cities get represented because we can't pave all the places that need to be paved.
And so, he was saying that we do need other resources. I don't know if Domino's is the right one, and certainly I would leave it up to the Board of Alders. I guess they have to approve.
Well, it's like
every
that question with the bike share. People were
Mhm.
upset about the ads, which I think is a fair cultural question. But if they're also upset about tax raises and they want to have alternatives to car transportation, someone's got to pay for it.
No, everything costs money, unfortunately.
But we had a
All
good
of it does.
discussion, so they're trying to work it out in a way that everybody can be happy. Sometimes works, sometimes doesn't.
Sometimes doesn't.
And okay.
Trust me, I know.
And the Alders on Monday night called for a public hearing into credit card use in the city.
Yep.
And other people said this was an isolated incident. You had an employee who was hitting hard times, and that happens sometimes at any business, and used a credit card and bought
Mhm.
$11,000 of stuff. Is there a larger problem that needs reviewing? Were other people using credit cards like that wrong, or was this isolated?
It was isolated, and it's unfortunate because I think you're right. Unfortunately, one of our employees was evicted. She had access to someone else's credit card and used it inappropriately. We looked through the past 2 years. We haven't seen anything like that.
Okay. And you are listening to Mayor Monday on Thursday, unless you're listening on Monday on WNHH 103.5 FM, live streamed at newhavenindependent.org. So we got some events coming up. Thursday night is the Hunter Gala, where some people are going to be getting awards for works they do on immigration. Are you hitting that one?
Yeah, and Rick Fontana is going to be getting an award, and we just want to
Mercy
congratulate him.
And this was because of all the Puerto Rican evacuees from Hurricane Maria who have settled. You have hundreds now, hundreds of families,
Hundreds
right?
of them. As a matter of fact, I was having breakfast this morning over at the Greek Olive, and I noticed that we have a lot of school buses coming to that hotel, and I'm thinking that that there are some who may still be
Right.
in
Is that money
hotel.
running out? I know Blumenthal got it extended.
It may well be. I'm not.
By the way, what's the kitchen cabinet? You said that. What is that?
Basically, it's something that we do on Mondays. We have leaders from across the city, the coordinators, some of the departments, and we just sort of look at what different departments are doing.
And every Monday you do this?
Not every Monday, but most Mondays.
Because I remember Ben DeLito, when he was mayor in the 80s, he used that phrase. He had it, actually, it was somewhat formalized. He had
Mhm.
Sam Chauncey, who was running Science Park.
Mm-hmm.
He had Paul Johnson, who was a banker,
Mm-hmm.
Bank of Connecticut Savings Bank. And he sort of like, that was his way of having advisors who weren't government officials coming in and giving him feedback.
So this is more all of us sort of looking at successes and then looking at problems that we might have, and then using the team approach to solve those problems.
All right. By the way, I was thinking of Ben DeLito, the
Mhm.
mayor from the 80s, because he one day, how he made phone calls and didn't make phone calls when major decisions were made. And I was
Mhm.
thinking that you're going to be in that same situation soon. So right now, there's a competition for who's going to put the next downtown entertainment venue. And you have this great problem. You have this empty space, used to be Boppers and Clarence's Courtchester,
Mhm.
which was my favorite one, under the garage in Temple Street, Crown Street Garage at Crown and Chapel, next to Schubert, across from Carl Street Music Hall. And two different groups want to put in venues there.
Mm-hmm.
There's a coalition of the Schubert, Long Wharf Theater, and Albertus Magnus Theater department that wants to put in a smaller venue than the Schubert for theater, as well as a Joe's Pub thing and rehearsal and space for Albertus. So that's one, keep the theater district with even more theater.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got the people who run the College Street Music Hall who have been a wild success. I would always argue this is one of the biggest successes of your administration that doesn't get talked about much, was how 10 years that nothing was happening at that theater. You found a way to beat Yale, who was trying to stop anyone from using it. And you got this thing built in like 7 months, amazingly, and it's been this wild success. So they want to move across the street and open a smaller venue, like the Fairfield Theater type venue. So to add with more music to it's already a big music district. I mean, Cafe 9, Pacific Standard Tavern, a couple others on the street. I mean, it's really going strong. We just have a new one at the Grove, too. So you're going to have to decide between two interesting proposals that, if you decide they're valid proposals, could really be the next step in boosting downtown. And they're both influential people who have done good in our city. And you're going to have to say no to one of them. So it's a good problem, but you are going to have to say no.
Well, but, I'm not going to have to say no. This is the parking authority's decision. And I haven't really weighed in yet. I haven't looked at the proposals. I'm going to check with, I guess, Doug, who is
House Lady.
Who is working with the parking authority to see where we are and where they are in that decision-making matrix.
I remember the reason I brought up Ben DeLito. He had some of those good problems sometimes, too, where a lot of people wanted to build on some city land or something. You had to pick one. And often there, too, there'd be people who were good people in the community or very influential people. And it's terrible to say no. So someone who worked for him told me that the winner would get the call from the mayor. And the losers would have to get the call. That call would have to be made from the department head. I say, I got bad news for you.
That's an interesting.
So they would get reamed out, and the mayor would be thanked.
Okay.
Any thoughts on any phone calls you're going to make?
Haven't had any. I haven't really taken a look.
These are the big questions. You didn't duck the Peapod, but you're ducking this one. I'm just kidding. The other upcoming events, George Jepsen, 30 years of tribute. He's the Attorney General. He's retiring. He's been public service 30 years. I think, was it 12 years as Attorney General?
Yeah, I think it's been a while. And I served with him in the General
So
Assembly.
where's this tribute taking place Saturday night?
I know it's in Hartford, West Hartford.
So you're going to be going to that?
I hope to go.
Because you had a good, close relation. We worked with them on this UI plant in
right.
English Station.
We worked on gun legislation, 25 years ago. And we have some of the best gun legislation in the country. He did the initial work on all of that. And he's been really great throughout his public service to our
And then a big
state.
event on Sunday. And I would say this is a notable success in government working with the people. People who are sometimes pretty disconnected to government, which is people who hang out in skate parks. Not just in the teens, but in their 20s. They are very excited about what happened with the rebuilt skate park in Edgewood Park. Always heavily used, built a generation earlier. They went to all these meetings with architects and people from the city. They even got to say who would get, help say who would get chosen from Bridgeport to redesign it, how it would be redesigned based on the way they use the skate park. And people were getting raves. Just people very psyched about this already. It has opened up, and you got a celebration of that on Sunday.
Well, and we really need to thank people like Ben Berkowitz for, as a local entrepreneur, having a real interest in that park, and so many people who care about it and use it. It's just amazing to me, and it's a wide span of ages. I remember when my son was like, I don't know, 8 or 9, and this had to have been 25 years ago, and I thought that it would be something that would die out. Skateboarding
it's
thing.
a real culture. And also there's a whole female, girls have gotten into it. And young
Really?
women. Yeah, there's a
Oh,
whole
wow.
culture now where there are stars who sell the merchandise. I don't know about this stuff. I just we do these stories. So I find my way around, I'm editing, try to learn about it a little bit. So there's a whole culture now of female skateboarders, not just a macho thing anymore.
Well, that's fantastic.
Because I used to walk by, because we walk by there most Saturdays when we're walking on Shabbos for walks. And I always noticed the boys are skateboarding and the girls are kind of watching them. But apparently that's changing. So
Oh,
that's
that's
good.
fantastic.
They get to get bruised up everything too, and fall on these
If their
concrete
knees
things.
scarred, right?
And finally, you're going to be on the other side of the mic next Wednesday. You're going to be in Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser has invited you to moderate a panel discussion among mayors on maternal and infant health in cities. Tell me, how did that come about, and what are you looking
So
for there?
there was an article at the beginning of the year in the New York Times about maternal deaths, and
Maternal deaths.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and it's one of those things that goes often. We hear about deaths of, the babies in birth, but we don't often think that women, in the 1800s, women died in childbirth all the time. And so we just have assumed that that is not a problem in America anymore. And yet, when we look at maternal deaths, particularly in large urban areas, typically it's poor Black women who die in childbirth. And so,
there was an amazing magazine story in the New York Times a couple of months ago about including it does not just class for Black women.
mm-hmm,
The doctors don't take them seriously when they have complications that are going to kill them.
right.
They're not recognized. They're not, and they have these. What are these women called who coach you through pregnancy?
Yeah,
Some kind of
midwives or
no, not the midwives. You get this kind of coach who's been through it, and they're using those to help Black women. It was written by a very upper class Black woman
Oh, okay,
who almost died in childbirth
right.
for the same reasons, and then they were following. She did studies on this, and they were following.
And
Yeah,
so-
it's a very moving story.
Mayor Bowser read those stories and thought that there should be some national attention paid to this issue. So it's going to happen at the Congressional Black Caucus, and she invited me to participate, so I will be there.
All right. Well, I hope that goes well. And while you're there, they might have confirmed a new Supreme Court justice who might help roll back abortion, and that could affect women's health.
Absolutely,
And
absolutely, cause more maternal deaths, unfortunately.
any thoughts on the anonymous article about Donald Trump in the New York Times and the anonymous sources in the book by Bob Woodward about the Trump administration?
Well, I think that the people who care about our country, even if they work for Donald Trump, have got to be concerned. And I think that's what those articles indicate.
I had problems with the anonymity.
Well, of course.
No, it wouldn't be, of course. It'd be the opposite.
No, I mean,
I'm skeptical of anonymous sources and not taking responsibility for what they're doing.
No, that's because you are, you're in this business, and I think that you're right to be skeptical. But you know how he is, and it's sort of like off with your head if you contradict him.
Okay, but we're going to keep our heads on.
At
least 2 more weeks, because we're going to continue on with Mayor Monday on Thursday on our biweekly schedule through Columbus Day.
Okay, well, look forward to it.
Thank you so much, Mayor Harper, for coming in. I hope you have a really useful and fun, rewarding time in Washington dealing with that important issue. And I want to thank Gateway Community College and Bertram Moses PC for providing support for today's program. Thanks for listening, everyone. And we're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. We know what it's like to be free. We just got to remember to book our flight. Book it with us all day and fly free with us all night at WNHH, your home for community radio.